Well, welcome everybody. This is the highest honor of my life. The gentleman I'm going to be talking about was my all-time hero in this stunt event. He was very instrumental in everything I've done in this hobby, along with my father's. And I also want to thank Bernadette and Gina Scarinzi for allowing these airplanes to be presented to the AMA. As I said in the meeting we just came from, I've known Larry since I was an embryo. Some of my earliest recollections were Larry Scarinzi and Red Reinhardt playing with me on the living room floor of my parents' house. I was 18 at the time. I was just about 2 or 3 years old. Red worked for my dad for about 30 years. And wherever Red was, Larry was, because they were best friends. So I had great mentors and great examples, as did everyone on the East Coast. We all idolized Red and Larry, but especially Larry, because where Red had the cool of a Steve McQueen, Larry was more like, well, Jack Benny, Jerry Lewis, and perhaps Robin Williams. He was a totally zany person to the day he died. He never grew up, and we could all relate to him. He was born on April 14th, 1933, and he died, unfortunately, on August 5th, 2023. I had just went out to dinner with a small group of his friends with Larry, and very shortly after that, he passed away. His impact on everyone on the East Coast was amazing through the 1950s and the 1960s. Larry was, from the very first, a proponent of high-performance airplanes, whether it be combat airplanes or stunt airplanes. And in those days, they were stunt airplanes, not precision aerobatic airplanes. They were fast, they were flashy, flapless, and no mufflers. And every Thursday night at the club meeting in Union, we would see, it seemed like every week, a new airplane from Larry. It really wasn't that way. But I was fortunate enough to see many of his airplanes, the first iterations of them, fly their first flights, including the Grey Ghost, the infamous Grey Ghost, and the Werewolf, and many, many others. I want to tell you a short story about Larry's influence on me in the stunt event. I was about 10 years old, in 1958. And if you remember, that was the year, the pattern we're flying now, essentially, except for the Clover entry, was the first introduced and flown in 1958. And Larry had an airplane called the Gay Devil. It was a flapless, Fox 35 powered, high-speed stunt model. And he was at the field practicing. And I was walking by the expert circle, and I stopped for some reason to watch him, not even knowing there was a pattern. And it seems to me he flew about 300 patterns. It was probably more like 5. But for some reason I sat down and I watched. And it was at that very moment I decided I wanted to fly stunt. That's the kind of impact he had. Larry's first control line stunt model that was published was the Sky Devil. He had several flapless airplanes that were published. One was the Sky Devil was the first, I believe. The Gay Devil was next, and then the Little Dynamite, and then the Grey Ghost. Those were all flapless, high-performance airplanes. And one of the airplanes we're going to induct here today is the Sky Devil, which was published in December 1956, Flying Models magazine. Had a Fox 35, silk and dope finished, and again, was non-flapped. And I'd like to present that airplane to the museum now. Built in 1956. I'm going to skip stunt for a minute I'm going to go to combat. Larry was known not so much as a combat competitor, but as a research and developer of combat airplanes and combat motors. He worked with Bill James and Duke Fox to develop the Fox Combat Special through the 1960s. And a list of his airplanes that he published, combat airplanes, is long. It's the Grease Lightning, which if you ever looked at the Grease Lightning and look at a modern FAI combat airplane, there's virtually no difference in the layout. So he was way ahead of his time. The Killer, the Giant Killer, the Hatchet, the Werewolf, published in Flying Models with a werewolf drawing by Red Reinhardt, and I saw the first flight of that airplane. The Blitz, the Lethal Blast, and the Super Satan. And it's the Super Satan we're going to talk about here today. This airplane was featured on the cover of Model Airplane News. I don't have the date here. I should have that date, but I don't. September 1967. It was published. Does anybody remember that cover? Who was on that cover with Larry? Does anybody remember? It was Don Cosmillo, stunt flyer, who was flying a match against Don Schulman, Leon Schulman's son, who I went to work for many years later. And so this airplane here is the original Super Satan that was featured in the Model Airplane News article in 1967. Did well over 120 miles an hour in that era. And then the Blitz subsequently did over 130 miles an hour. So, presenting that to your museum, my friend. And again, I want to thank Michael for all he's done to make this happen, Michael Smith. Down to the one I'm going to get a little bit emotional about. This airplane, for those of us who live on the East Coast, is an icon. The story behind it is fabled. I don't know how much of it is true, but the story goes that Larry and his friend Barry Simmons, who was a senior flyer in the New Jersey area, New Jersey as we called it, decided at the 11th hour they wanted to go to Dallas to fly at the 64 Nationals, and they designed brand new airplanes and built airplanes in less than a month from scratch. And this is the Blue Angel that Larry flew at the 64 Nationals in Dallas. This airplane has, guess how many flights on it? 17 total flights. Why? Well, he got down there, well, before he even went, Barry's airplane was crashed and they had to repair it. Then they drove to Dallas, and he flew this airplane in about 110-degree heat. And he needed to do an adjustment to the engine to reduce the horsepower. So Duke Fox himself carved a plug to go in the Venturi, which is probably still in there. And Larry flew his final flight, and it was lean, and he knew he was going to go overtime over the allotted 8 minutes. So he decided, instead of flying level and trying to burn fuel, he decided to fly at the top of the circle, overheat the engine, and it blew the gasket, shut off, and he landed, as the story goes, just a couple of seconds before going overtime. Took third place behind Jim Solhavy in first and Mario Rondinelli in second. And this airplane was published in Flying Models in February of 1965. It has a Fox 59, and this was done with Titanine dope, not Aeroblast. There was a company in Union, New Jersey that manufactured model airplane dope. And he covered this airplane in, if you can see, it's as pretty today as the day it was buffed out first. So this is the story of the Blue Angel, and I've loved this airplane from the time I was a kid. So we're presenting this to the museum today. I'd like to thank you all for attending this. It meant a lot to me.